Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Liberate Yourself podcast, where we discuss cultivating personal sovereignty in these here transitional times. I'm your host, Trista Dedman, an astrologer, mystic, and creative coming to you from the gorgeous Pacific Northwest. If you're new here, I want to extend a warm welcome and invite you into this fold. You can expect my guests and I to share our stories as we journey through this wild ride of life through consciousness expansion, metaphysics, mystical practices, the occult, astrology, and many other esoteric modalities. Here we are. We find ourselves here on the other side of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn. We're still alive, still standing, and you may be on board with me in that we are actually thriving in ways that are not quite discernible yet. The heavy implosion in Capricorn energy at the beginning of 2020 has felt like it broke our lives into pieces and parts. And now it's our role to reconfigure them in a way that serves ourselves and the greater good. So thank you for coming along on this journey with me. It is such an honor to hold space for both my guests and for you as you process through the transitions and transformations going on in your life. To ongoing listeners, it has been a while, and I need to apologize for the delay in getting this transmission out to you. Chelsea and I recorded this conversation back in October of 2019. I've been working through many levels of my own transformation, as I'm sure you can relate, and the podcast editing just did not find the time in my schedule. I definitely still feel the call to continue creating this project, as I know and I've heard from many of you that it is uplifting, inspiring, and a great companion on your own path of unfolding. I just finally decided that I'm not putting any undue pressure on myself and will let them flow as they will, probably releasing a new transmission once or twice a month, so definitely stay tuned. You can for sure stay up to date by subscribing in your favorite podcast app and by getting on my mailing list at tristadedman.com. This transmission is one that is really special. So if you're new, this is a great place to have an introduction to the kinds of themes that we talk about here. Chelsea Chung is a multidimensional marketing mentor and Ascension coach. She is a real powerhouse of curiosity and expansive energy that I feel we need more of in the world if we are going to progress society along a benevolent trajectory. After our conversation, I actually inquired with Chelsea about working together, and the rest is current history. She has been an absolute huge catalyst for my own evolution as an entrepreneur and creator in the past few months, and I can't recommend her enough as a business mentor and spaceholder for your own personal and professional growth in this paradigm. In our conversation, we share both of our journeys of awakening and finding ourselves in the places we are now as wayshower entrepreneurs, the power of doing personal alchemical work to serve with your light in its fullest expression, and our future visions for the collective that includes open source energy exchange and the partnership we are developing with technology as a tool for understanding consciousness. I sincerely hope you enjoy this conversation I had with Chelsea, and feel free to reach out to her after the show with the links in the show notes. Now, let's get to it.
Today I am very good. So to answer that question, I am great. To be honest, like last week and even a little bit the week before, I went into this like major contraction shadow period, which was actually perfect. So I know you had spoken into kind of going through a similar energy, and it was great that we actually rescheduled this, because last week, like I didn't have the energy to do anything. I was feeling really contracted. I was feeling triggered. And it didn't feel like mine. It felt bigger. It felt very, it's like super collective in a way. I mean, I don't want to bypass the pieces that were actually mine, because I know that those were there too, but
it's one and the same though, right? I totally felt the same thing. Like I didn't even, and I love that I could just email you and be like, I know you understand, but I am like somewhere that is not totally like present and conscious in the outside world right now.
Yeah.
But I will be.
Yeah. Totally.
So it's good to know it's not, it's just great to have that confirmation that it's not just us whenever waves of that kind of energy are rolling through and continue to roll through. Because yeah, definitely been feeling the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we're in early October 2019, about to go into we're kind of finishing up Libra season, but segueing into Scorpio season, and looking to an upcoming Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. So I think that part of me feels like this has been sort of a preliminary getting us ready for the depths of that kind of work. It's really
Absolutely.
beautiful. It's like this beautiful gateway to it that is
Yeah.
so important. It's
Yeah.
really so important. I feel like there's going to be a lot of themes and a lot of talk around integrating the really deep shadow aspects collectively and individually, because yeah, I feel like it's just one and the same. There's no separation when it comes to that kind of work.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for that. I am just really like gearing up and ready to dive deep.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that there is so much gold that lives there. And I'm ready for it. I mean, I think I've been preparing for many years to actually get to a place where I am finally like prepared for it, know that it's coming, can feel myself on the precipice. And it's like I'm getting my gear together, right? I'm
Yeah,
like packing my camp bag to like go dive into the underworld, and like I'm just ready for it.
exactly. Me too. I have similar feelings too, because it's this almost like this feeling of, oh, this is what we've been preparing for the last 2 3 5 however many years. And I think that when we were in the thick of it, those of us that are a bit more like on the leading edge of whatever you want to call it, ascension or evolution, we've been kind of put through these trials and been awakening in our own ways, I feel, so that we can be more prepared for this time, and also for others that are just beginning. I'm starting to see this whole new wave of everyone, like the general population, starting to wake up and realize,
Yes,
see through the matrix, etc. um
totally.
see through the Maya, as it were.
Yeah.
But let's start with, what was your let's talk about both of our journeys, actually. Like,
Yeah, I would love that.
what was yours like most recently? Like, I know our entire lives are the journey, but
Yeah.
when did you start to really wake up to your full power, and what your, start on this most recent
Yeah.
path of what your purpose is at this time?
Sure. So I'll go a little bit further back than recent, but it really is kind of the string of the journey, really
Yeah.
beginning in 2012, which I think is so perfect because we all know 2012 was a big year in a lot of ways. And for me, it started with my body. It started physically, because up until that point, I had always had a lot of health issues. I had always been someone who just believed like I have a weak immune system. That's kind of what I told other people. That's what I had told myself. And in my early 20s, I was going through this process of going to all of these different doctors. I was going to an allergist for my allergies, and a dermatologist for my acne, and a therapist for my depression and anxiety. And I was, from each of these different doctors, I was getting prescribed different medications. And I just came to this realization of like, okay, one, there has to be some underlying thing happening here that is connecting all of this, right? Like I have one body,
Yeah.
and it's not like just manifesting in these separate areas. Like there's something deeper going on. And so that was kind of my first insight into like wholeness and oneness. Like, okay, everything is connected here. And at the same time, I was really deep heavy into my party years, which I love talking about. I mean, I look back on those years of my life, which is such gratitude and love, because I was having so much fun. I mean, I was really living life in a big way. And I was going to a lot of music festivals and raves and dance parties and nightclubs and flying to Las Vegas every few weeks. And it was really heart opening and mind expanding, because I was also experimenting with different drugs, or I know last time we connected, we actually prefer the word plant medicine, right? Or different medicines. Not all of them were beautiful medicines. Some of them were very toxic too.
Right.
And so it, there was a lot of beauty, but there was a lot of toxicity with that as well. And so no wonder that my body was also having a hard time keeping up. But so I was coming to this realization of like oneness with my body. I was having super big mind and heart opening experiences, and spiritual experiences that I couldn't really explain. And I was also recognizing that the way that I was showing up in the world was impacting those around me and my own life. So if I was showing up positively and with enthusiasm and just living unapologetically and in my truth, people were just responding so beautifully to that. And, they started to pick up on that energy and act that way too. And so it was really this perfect storm of a mind, body, soul awakening happening at the same time.
Because you were also working in the corporate world, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So that was like this really beautiful kind of contrast in lifestyle, or dual lifestyle almost, huh?
Absolutely. And I, in some ways, that's just always been part of my path and story. It's like, I feel like I've lived duality very well. I'm actually a Libra rising. This is like just coming to me now. I'm a Libra rising. So maybe part of my purpose, in this lifetime is to learn that balance and that harmony.
I was actually going to bring that up. Yeah. Cause we're both Libra rising. So I feel like, people on the surface, people think, oh, that means balance and beauty and harmony. Well, how do you get those? How do you know where the middle point is you have to live both extremes, like the good and the bad, the dark and the light, like constantly, and figure out where that equilibrium is. So that, totally.
Yes.
That's our life.
Yep. My life has been one of extremes for sure. So coming, out of a couple of years after this, so probably, I think it was 2014, I was really having this longing for some sort of spiritual container. I had grown up Catholic, and Catholicism, Christianity, it honestly, it never really resonated with me. I remember being a child and going to church and just not caring. I mean, not really understanding the words that were coming through, just not really feeling energetically connected to it. But all throughout my life, I really believe that I was a spiritual being.
Yeah.
But I had no way of expressing it or connecting with it.
Same here.
And especially, living in a Catholic family household. I mean, my parents weren't like super strict to it by any means, but there just was a general sense of, this is the way, this is the path, and to look outside of that path isn't Christian.
Yeah.
And so, in my mid 20s, especially after having these awakening experiences, I needed some way to make sense of it. And perfectly enough, a friend of mine had stumbled across this woman's website who was offering something called the priestess process. And she sent it to me, and I read the website, read the words. I had no idea what they said or like what any of it meant. I just knew that they were totally activational, and that is what I wanted and needed.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll probably get into this later. I won't go into too much detail about the priestess process, but it changed my life. It was a completely transformative container for me, where for the first time I was being asked to define my own connection to the divine within and without, and to express however I intended to commune with that divine, and to learn the power of ceremony and ritual and sacred intent. And I loved that process so much that I actually ended up doing a second year, a high priestess process, which was much more cosmic in nature. I mean, once you kind of had the footing, the grounding of the priestess process, the second year, the high priestess process, was really just going beyond yourself and thinking of the cosmic one on that galactic level. And that honestly was so resonant with me, just because I have always known that I am this galactic star being of
Yeah.
sorts. And I believe that most of my lifetimes were actually incarnations on other, within other systems, and that I'm not actually a veteran earthling.
Mm-hmm.
So
I feel like a lot of us are like that, or have felt that all of our lives. Like, what are we doing here? What are these surroundings? What are these rules? These supposed
totally.
rules don't make any sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a dense reality that we live in here. But so after the high priestess process, I apprenticed a first year priestess process circle, and so through that, I did become a certified priestess process facilitator, which I haven't officially held my own priestess process yet, but I'm actually going to be co-creating that with priestess sister of mine
Mm-hmm.
this winter, so I'm super excited about that. But that was really just my foray into leadership and into like living my truth and power.
I was going to ask, what do you feel, how do you feel that role and the practices of priestesshood? How do you feel that holds space for others, or how do you feel that can be incorporated into what we're going through now, the transition and into a new society and way of being? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And you touched on probably my favorite piece of it, which is holding space.
Yeah.
It is just massively powerful to hold space for others, to hold space for the collective, to hold space just for everything and all that is in its fullest expression. Before finding the priestess process, I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know what it was like to have space held for me, let alone hold it for others. And so I think the first piece of that was to understand the power of having space for me, having space held for me. And the priestess process was just so perfect for that, because it was such a beautiful container. And we learned how to allow people to just speak fully into their story and their experience without the need to chime in or project onto it, or for it to elicit a
Name it.
reaction, to name it.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was just like, just let it be. It is what it is. And there was so much transmutation that occurred in just having that space to speak into it and to fully feel into it and embody it. And it truly was an alchemical process whereby having that space, you were able to take those experiences and those emotions and everything, and just let it be, to express it, and then to integrate it into a deeper way. So yeah.
I would even say it's from what I'm hearing, to reflect back to you, it sounds almost like an education in knowing oneself or connecting with someone's true, authentic being.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we don't get taught that. That's why
I
that comes up. It's like we don't really, most of us don't have that container, or that people on the outside telling us or nurturing that part of us that's like, how do you feel about this, or how do you
right.
what do you think, what are you going through, what's your experience like, what do you think about that? If
Totally.
people would have asked me that, oh my god, like what?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what we're shifting towards it. I mean, that's the whole crux of my work, I feel, is that, by holding that space for others and holding that space for ourselves. I love that you touched on that, because I feel like most of our journeys right now is really about just allowing our true self to arise, and thereby, like, it's not this solitary thing, right? If
Yeah.
everyone is doing that or focused on that, then we come together more easily.
Totally.
Do you
Like
agree?
yeah, I mean, I am just such a proponent of doing the work, the inner work, right? And taking responsibility over yourself, and just this whole concept of sovereignty. And I mean, it really does begin with us as individuals, but it's the only way that we are going to impact and grow together and impact the collective.
And I like to, a caveat I've been putting on it is that it's not a resistant act. It's not necessarily like, it doesn't need to be in the spirit of rebellion or resistance. And this is like me telling myself that because I've been such a rebel about it forever, like anti this, anti that, anti-establishment, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And what I'm really starting to get and learn is that it's all in love, right? It's
All in love.
all, yeah, it always comes back to love. Like,
It does. It really does. Yeah. I mean, that's actually, that's one of my like truths that I hold on to, is that love is the answer. And I don't even fully understand what that means, but like, I just like, love is the answer.
yeah,
That's it.
it always is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, can you describe a little bit, because people like us that do the inner work, we talk about it maybe even a bit veiled or mysteriously.
Sure.
For someone out there that maybe is probably already doing the inner work or is curious about turning inward more, can you explain maybe some things in the priestess process, or even that you've come to understand intuitively? What would you say that part of that inner work is?
Yeah. So
Parts of that.
I think, and I'll maybe weave in some ways that
Yeah.
you can get to doing the inner work and how it's helpful, because the inner work, if I were just to kind of define it, is understanding and coming into wholeness with everything that you are: the light, the dark, your bigness, your smallness, the microcosm of the macrocosm. I mean, it is just becoming aware and integrating the totality of who you are. And okay, that's even kind of mysterious, right? But
Very well, no, very well put. And probably the reason, just to interject, probably the reason it's so mysterious, and what I've found, yes, everything comes back to love, but when it comes to inner work, I have found that really everything comes down to alchemical process.
Yeah,
Almost everything comes back to transmutation of the dark into the light and the vertical axis. Do
yeah,
you agree? Because it's like, no matter what if you look at the
yeah.
elements, everything that is elemental really comes down to the alchemical process.
Totally. I do agree, but I'm gonna put a
Yes.
caveat on that. But first I'll tell you why I agree, because I do truly believe in conscious ascension, and just ascension as a being and embodying our fullness and stepping into the truth of who we are, our higher self. And the reason I'm putting a caveat onto this is because I'm really doing a lot of deep thinking lately about this idea of always moving up. And,
Yeah.
and is it really just ascension? Is it really moving more fully into the light? Because what I'm starting to question is like, there is such deep power in dark.
Oh yeah.
And and to go down and go below is magical and powerful too. And so I am pro light. I am team light. I actually sometimes like describe this to other people, where like I do think that another cosmic truth is duality, and whether that's light and dark, whatever you want to call it, God, devil, or whatever,
Yeah.
just the duality is that you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that one is positive, one is negative.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, like the darkness holds space for the light. But I do say in general, like I'm on team light because I really do love the light, but I do need to honor and understand that your capacity to hold light is equal to your capacity to hold darkness as well.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that being said, I feel like that is what, going back to how you explained inner work, that's exactly what we're doing, I
Yes,
feel. Because
exactly.
if we run along on autopilot according to, the common narrative, then the common narrative tells us, don't look at the dark, don't look at the things that are uncomfortable or that we don't
Right.
like about ourselves, and that's when we end up putting it in the shadows or casting it off, and then it comes out sideways and all kinds of strange ways.
Exactly.
So yeah, is that what, would you agree that that is precisely what inner work is taking all of, and this is very Libran of us, right? Taking
Yeah.
all of that into account
Yeah.
for, to become integrated and whole and to operate from that place in life.
Yes. Yes. I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. I mean, that's how I see it. And I believe in that process. And I love that you also spoke to it as an alchemical process. I really do see it as an alchemical process into embodying our divine God self.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that is another belief of mine, is that we are source, like we are God. We are not separate from all that is, and we are divine beings. And so part of this process is to alchemize our full experience into embodying that wholeness, which is a divine wholeness. I mean, it is that totality, that one. And yeah, I get fired up about that, because I'm just like, we are gods and goddesses. I mean,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And so what would some like a very simple process, what would like a very simple process to get started with that? Like going back to old memories of traumatic memories and, you know, in meditation and possibly just facing them, looking at them, feeling the feelings so that they don't get buried anymore. That's okay. I'm answering my own
Yeah.
question. That's what
Yeah.
I would say. But how, from a priestess perspective, how would you, you know, maybe guide someone or have someone do that work on their own to get started?
Yeah. So what you were touching on, I would kind of classify generally as shadow work. And so that is a piece of it. I think that that shadow work of being able to dive into the subconscious and to shine the light on those pieces, and that's difficult, right? It's not easy to access our subconscious
Mm-hmm.
because it's in our subconscious. We're not consciously aware of it. But I do think awareness is key. So even practices that help you deepen your awareness, like meditation, I think is so beautiful for that, because I think it's such a powerful place to learn to be the observer of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you can walk through the world and have these different experiences, it's not that you're trying to like get out of your experiences or reactions. You're trying to become aware of them so that you understand, like, where is this coming from? Why is this happening? Why am I reacting this way? Why is this triggering me? And then you need to go back and sit with that and explore that more deeply, right? Like if someone is, yells at you on the street and it really just triggers you, you have to go back and be like, okay, what is it about someone else yelling at me that makes me uncomfortable? Was
Mm-hmm.
I yelled at as a child? What feelings does it bring up for me? Does it make me feel like I'm not doing something right? Is it making me feel unworthy? And all of a sudden you have this whole area to explore around unworthiness or anger. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so deep.
Yeah. It's beyond
Yeah,
words.
it's beyond words. Yeah. And that is why, to kind of bring this, back to the space holding, that's
Mm-hmm.
why it's so important to not only be able to hold space for yourself, but to have other people hold space for you to journey within and look at all that, because it's too easy to just like run away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to bring, because it will bring up the triggers again. It'll bring up those emotions, and that's not comfortable to sit with. So
Mm-hmm.
so that's, I think, one way of doing that inner work, is that shadow work. Another thing that we did early on in the priestess process that was really helpful for me was just looking at and understanding different archetypes. So understanding gods and goddesses, and learning about Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, or looking at Carl Jung and his model of archetypes. Because in order to come into wholeness, like, we need to understand the pieces as
Yeah.
well.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have a model or a construct where we can start to dive into individual pieces and then be able to weave them together and claim them, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I think it's a path to wholeness is understanding the parts.
Yeah. And to understand, because that's how I learned tarot as well. That's
Mhm.
how a lot of occultists approach tarot, is that all of those archetypes reside within all of us at any given time. Like,
Yeah,
and to know that they are all part of us, part of our subconscious and the collective unconscious,
totally.
you know.
And
And it gives perspective and context for our lives, where it's like, oh, I'm going through this theme right now, I am experiencing this right now. It doesn't mean it's forever, and it doesn't mean anything is, you know, detrimental or what have you. It's just, this is the experience right now, so you're going
right.
through this hall, or the, you know, this
Yes.
way of this part of life that many before you have gone through.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's really lovely. Archetypes are so important to really comprehend and understand oneself deeply beyond words. That's their whole point, right?
Totally.
Same with the zodiac, same with astrology. That's why I love
Exactly.
astrology. It's an
Yeah, yeah.
archetypal language, you know,
Right.
and we
Yeah.
do our best to explain it in words, poetically interpret it in my case.
Well,
Um,
and language as a whole is archetypal. I mean,
yeah,
language is really just a bunch of symbols.
yep.
And I know you've spoken into this in other podcasts, but I mean, language, like words are just things that we've made up to try to convey and communicate meaning with one another. And we've come a long way, and there's a lot that we can express in our words, but you know, reality and beyond reality is so much deeper than what is able to be expressed in these word symbols that we've come up
Mm.
with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and symbols and archetypes are, I feel, timeless. I
Yeah.
mean, it's been language has changed, or, you
Yeah.
know, our kind of speaking language has changed, but archetypes are universal
Yeah.
and limitless and timeless, and
Yeah.
in that regard.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, let's talk. How did how did your work with the priestess process, how are you integrating that into the work that you do now? And do you want to talk a little bit about what you're currently offering for
Yeah.
entrepreneurs?
So first of all, I mean, it really, the priestess process and the tools and just the way of being that I learned there has really just become part of my life. I mean, it's really just the way that I walk in the world, and that I experience life. And so for me, the work that I'm bringing through is how do I create work or bring services and offerings to the world that are in alignment with the truth that I'm already expressing just by being who I am out in the world. And so I'm just trying to bring all aspects of my life into greater alignment with who I am, who I'm becoming, because I have gone on such a transformational journey. So where I am right now with my work is, one is being that space holder. I mean, that is just one of my favorite parts of the work, is holding space for the experience of others. And in that, what my goal is to support that conscious ascension of individuals and the collection, or the collective, because I do believe, you know, the inner creates the outer, and as we change ourselves, we change the world. So we as individuals have massive and powerful impact on the world. And so I want to start on that individual level of doing that work. Another aspect of that I've woven into my work and my services is that because I am in the process of stepping into my own leadership with this, I want to help and support others who are wanting to do the same, who are wanting to bring their life into greater alignment with their purpose and their gifts, and to bring those out into the world, because I also believe that the world is in need of our gifts, and that each one of us has magic to offer
Mm-hmm.
the world. And so I want to help others step into that capacity and offer their gifts and medicine to the world. And the way that I'm doing that is through alchemical business coaching, and I actually call it multidimensional marketing, because
Mm-hmm.
by trade, having worked in the corporate world for over a decade, I am a marketer by trade. I have a lot of feelings about marketing, right? There's a lot of light and a lot of shadow.
Yeah.
But the reason why I love marketing to begin with is because it's about storytelling. It really, at its core, should be about authenticity and
And not
creating,
manipulation, right?
not manipulation. Exactly. It
Mm.
should be about defining a vibration, a frequency, an essence, and then sharing that essence, with others who are in need of that frequency or vibration.
Mm-hmm.
So I have kind of two prongs to my business. One is just that general space holding and transformation. And I mentioned that I will be actually facilitating a priestess circle this coming winter. And then on the other hand of that, I have that more kind of business mentorship where I help others who are ready to step into leadership and share their gifts with the world. And those intertwine really beautifully too, because to step into a leadership role where you are sharing your gifts with the world, like you better be doing the inner work to get clear on who you are and what your gifts are, how they're supposed to serve the world, and remove those really common barriers and blockages that hold us back from stepping into our fullest light expression.
Exactly. Oh, I love all of that. As you
Yeah.
know, we're both like super passionate about new entrepreneurship, and
Yeah.
I've always really felt like it shouldn't be, because I feel like, we've been in this kind of bridge time of breaking out of having to be employed in a certain way for
Yeah.
the most part in order to live or exist, and we kind of broke out. There was like freelancing and then like online entrepreneurship and et cetera, et cetera, and that's where we find ourselves now. But yeah, there's this whole other level of it that
Yeah.
I love, that is spiritual in nature or energetic in nature, like really. I think we got to a point, that's what happened to me anyway. My personal journey with it is I got to a point where I was not being authentic because I wasn't, it wasn't at this point where I really felt safe to be the weird mystical person that I am
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
really bring in those natural abilities that incorporates my intuition, that incorporates my gifts. And I think that so many people are there, like right
Yeah.
now, it's
Yeah.
like right on that precipice where in order to be, in order to really create a society that is based on us being our most natural selves and contributing in our most natural ways,
Yeah.
we have to start incorporating that part of us and not carry on this tradition of putting that aside for a job or for a career. Like work
Absolutely.
life work life and home life are not separate. It really can't
Right.
be. There is no
No, there
separation.
is no separation. Well, Trisha, I think that's actually a perfect time to circle back, because at the beginning of the podcast we talked about each sharing our own story. So I would love to give you the opportunity to speak into, your journey with that, and kind of how you have come to the place that you are now, right? Because as someone right now who is still, one foot in the corporate world, part of my experience, my eventual medicine that I'll offer is like, how do we go through that transition, right? So I'd love to hear a little bit from you about what that transition was like.
Wow, yeah, thank you. I don't know that mine will be very similar because I have a thread of, like I said, a rebellious thread. And I just wrote about this yesterday too, of eschewing the established way of going through things. Like I've never worked in an office, I've never worked for a corporation, I've never even worked for a big company. I've always worked for individuals and been creative in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I was a hairstylist for a very long time. I got a fashion design degree in my 20s, thought that I wanted to, work in high-end aesthetics basically and design. And what I started to realize, I just got to this point. I was so miserable just like working for someone else that expected something very specific from
Yeah.
me that was so not me, and then not getting the time for myself. It made me a very angry person. It made me
Yeah.
like very miserable and very angry and just frustrated.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, then that came what came along was learning about, oh, you can be like a digital nomad, you can be like a remote worker or whatever. So I knew that I wanted to learn something that was more remote, but still my natural gifts, which was sort of technical design. Like I loved designing things for a practical reason.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned web design basically, and just kind of got into web design and development through another job, and just kind of found myself in the same place. Like I'm forced essentially to come to the same exact place for the same exact time every single day. And me
Mm-hmm.
personally, I don't flow that way.
Mm-hmm.
Pisces is my sixth house. It's my sun and my Mercury. Sixth house is like your daily routines.
Mm.
It's Pisces. There are no like boundaries, and I need the space to flow. What
Yeah.
do I feel? I'm still very responsible,
Yeah.
but it needs to happen in this way that isn't like a machine.
Yeah.
I was starting to feel like I was expected to be a machine, and I really feel like that's what a lot of people feel
Mm.
deep down with the
What's the way
past paradigm.
yeah, it's the way society is set up, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I really feel like we're moving past that. So, anyways, I just began freelancing just as a web developer, web designer, etc. And it just, I was kind of coupling that with like mindfulness and things like that. Like, I wasn't quite back into my like really admitting my spiritual self again.
Yeah.
There's just this point where it became, and I really got thrown into that, like with some really deep, kind of how you talked about, like you did it with partying, which is
Mm-hmm.
like so great. I love that duality. Mine was just like through certain life circumstances, very
Mm.
Plutonian circumstances, like
Mm.
getting thrown into, really emotionally traumatic situations where all of a sudden I was completely alone. And then what found me? Astrology, the
Mm.
occult again, because this
Mm-hmm.
all came to me when I was a child and when I was a teenager,
Mm.
but I put it aside. I kept like, no, you have to be a responsible adult and make money and pay the bills. And
Yeah.
I have a Capricorn moon, so like that's my subconscious. So that was kind of leading for a long time and I didn't realize it. But yeah, I just finally, I would say 2016 was the big one for me, where I went through this very, very intense, deep, like shadow dark time.
Mm.
And like I said, that's when I started really, it felt like an initiation, like talk
Mm-hmm.
about initiation. That was
Mm-hmm.
absolutely what was happening to me. I was starting to
Mm-hmm.
view the world through synchronicity. I was starting to get communicated to and
Mm.
learning about my own communication style with the divine and how my intuition works. And mind you, it's a
Mm-hmm.
process. I'm still
Mm-hmm.
just now claiming it.
Yeah.
But when I kind of came out of that darker period, I couldn't not, be that anymore, be my real self
Yeah.
and incorporate these things. So that's when,
Totally.
I took up astrology formally again as a study and started kind of working that into my offerings. And
Yeah.
in the beginning, I was still doing like brand design and astrology and weaving
Yeah.
that together. And
Uh-huh.
then I think it was last year actually that I got a really clear message that like, no, you just have to break off. Like, don't worry about offering design, because that was still like me hiding myself in other people's projects, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, totally.
And even though
Yeah,
I
I feel
love
that.
even though
Yeah.
I love collaborating on other people's vision and I love
Yeah.
like doing the coaching and holding space part, there was something like me putting my energy into someone else's presentation that was still blocking me. That was the
Yeah.
messaging. So that's the long-winded
Yeah.
story of how I'm here now.
No, that's
Um,
beautiful.
it's
And
like we get to a certain point and you can't not do, like you can't continue.
exactly. And that is how I was going to kind of come back to it, is just say, it doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter if you're in the corporate world or not in the corporate world. It doesn't matter what you've been doing. If it hasn't been totally in alignment with yourself, right? We have this massive shift and awakening happening where people are realizing like, oh shit, this isn't serving me, and I'm not serving the planet and the universe in a way that I could be by actually stepping into the truth of who I really am.
And you start
And
to learn that if you continue to do that, it doesn't work. Like it
yeah,
literally, there will be no clients, there will be no job, etc.
yeah,
That's how the universe works in order to push you into being who you truly are. And when you start to
totally.
express that, that's when people start to, like you said before, that's when people really start to respond to you because they're needing that, or because they're, it resonates with them. And that's
Yeah,
really what I feel like this kind of spiritual intuitive entrepreneurship is about.
yeah,
It's not about getting like the biggest audience or getting the biggest
right.
numbers. It's really just about finding the people that resonate on your specific frequency and that get,
Absolutely.
can use your medicine and vice versa. I think it's
Yeah,
very reciprocal as well. There's no
totally.
extraction.
No.
As far as, we're coming from this like extraction economy, and it's not that. It's really just sharing in that wavelength and
Yeah.
helping each other grow.
Yeah. And I love how that is like paving the way for so much skill sharing, right? Like I'm working with a few people right now who, there is no money exchange, there is no dollars. It is literally just energy. It is just, my energy for your energy. And let's work together, collaborate with one another, share each other's medicine and gifts, and let's lift each other up in the process. And I love it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I've like traded so much as far as like services and everything. And I feel like that is what is gearing us up. I mean, it's a big conversation, like the financial
Yeah.
evolution. But I
It
mean, it
is.
is something that fascinates me.
Same, yeah.
How the economy is changing and how, blockchain technology is going to be changing money. And I really think
Yeah.
that that is a symbol of how energy, it will be more apparent that it is energy being
Yeah,
exchanged at some
right.
point, instead of this sense of this is my self-worth, how much dollars I have. We're already
Totally.
used to it. We're already used to the currency being more digital. I just feel like that is really going to I think that the whatever the changes are, it's going to open up to this web of support,
Yeah.
between everyone, that it's exchanged through everyone.
And I think that web of support is going to actually impact a lot of the structures and paradigms, like, right? Like money, healthcare, education, marriage. I mean, like a lot of religion. I could just go
Mm,
on and on, right? All of like the existing structures and paradigms, like the way that they exist today, I think are going to be influenced and rebuilt, kind of reconstructed through this
right.
web of energy. And one thing that I just am feeling called to speak into right now, because I love the way this was described, was I believe it was Russell Brand. I love Russell Brand, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
He's like one of my favorites. He was speaking about like, the goal is not to just destroy everything and to like create massive destruction and burn it all down. Like the goal is to create something new that is so beautiful that it leaves the other obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
And I really love that, because yeah, it's not about like anger, hatred. It's not about like, screw you, I'm burning this down to the ground. I mean, okay, there's time
Yeah,
and place for that energy too.
but it goes
But
back to love, right?
yeah, right, exactly.
That's what I feel too. I mean, through many different channels or galactic information, that's usually the message about like this open source way of being, which is, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
what you were
Yep,
expressing with that, like
totally.
this decentralized open source way of energy moving about.
Yep,
But yes, and then also not looking at the thing that we don't like and trying to like change it, but
right.
literally just looking to the new or what is possible. But
Yes.
then also, I feel like a lot of it is, like you said, not tossing off, the old frameworks. We need some of them. Like
Yeah.
we do need some of
Yeah.
the frameworks, even traditions, things that are definitely a good foundation. Like we
Yeah.
need a foundation. It's just
Right.
that it can evolve
Yeah.
from the ground up, I
Right.
feel.
Exactly.
So yeah, very much like not destruction and tyranny and apocalypse and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, right. Creation, right? Let's
Yeah,
go towards
creation.
creation.
You've talked before when we connected about in that talk about, I mean, speaking of creation,
Yeah.
the real importance or beauty of bringing masculine and feminine energy together. The
Yeah.
divine masculine, the divine feminine.
Ah, absolutely. And again, the masculine and feminine are just two threads of this universal duality story, right? That we need to integrate, bring together these threads, all of these different threads to come into that total oneness. But the masculine and feminine are just they're so up in the collective right now too, that it's I mean, it's really everywhere. And so kind of how I spoke into earlier about how, it can be supportive to look at these archetypes and these tools to help us come into integration and wholeness. Like, what a perfect time for the collective to do this work, because I mean, these concepts are literally being thrown in our faces, whether it's on the energetic level, masculine and feminine, even down to like the gender level, right? Like, so much discussion around female, male, what does that mean? How do we embody the full spectrum of what's possible? And so masculine and feminine are just such potent energies right now, and we've lived in such a masculine energy dominated society, and I think that is one thing that people confuse a lot. Well, I mean, in some ways the masculine energy has been linked to men, right? Like the patriarchy, and in some ways they have fed each other. So you do have the rise of the patriarchy of men as a result of this masculine energy that has really taken root. And it's all about that, like, moving forward, getting done. You have to act, you have to do, you have to be, you have to climb, or be more. I guess being would be feminine, but you have to be more by doing.
Yeah.
It has just totally burnt us out.
Yeah.
And so many of us have just been conditioned into these masculine patterns. So like, not only do you have repressed feminine energy, you also have that toxic masculinity, which has just permeated society at large. And so there's a lot of there's kind of like dual unpacking to do there. There is one, looking at and honoring your feminine and bringing her back up to the surface and really claiming those pieces and sinking into softness and being and intuition and flow, and finding how much magic and grace is there, and how much power is in that feminine energy too, right? Because we've associated power with the masculine.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there is just as much power in the feminine, and in fact we need the feminine energy to rise up in a big way to help soften this toxic masculinity and to help create that space for the rise of the divine masculine to come back in. In my own process, and this is why the priestess process was so beautiful for me, is like, the priestess process is a very feminine process. And I, having been the doer, the ultimate achiever, the straight A student, the corporate worker, I had just totally lived in this masculine, in the shadow masculine energy for like almost my entire life. And so for the first time, I was given a container to just be in my feminine. And that has just, yeah, it's been so transformative. So I think the true power, though, right, is the divine union of those two.
Well said.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think we're finally getting to the point where we're getting past that point of the first wave of feminism where
Yeah.
it was just denouncing
Yeah.
all masculine energy and men and everything. It's like, no, that's
Right.
not the answer. You got to have them both again.
Right. Yep.
Have to integrate the two.
Yep.
So going forward then, with everything that's been said so far,
Yeah.
what are your, I like to ask this question towards
Yeah.
the end, what are your visions for a future society, say 10, 20, 30 years from now? I'm just laughing because my partner and I were on a hike yesterday and we were like, have a fucking clue what 30 years is going to look like from now, like
Oh wow, yeah.
every year, every month is so
Yeah.
different right now. We're like in this exponential,
Yeah.
it seems, wave
Yeah.
of transition and change. But yeah, what are your visions for a future society?
Yeah. Well, so we are absolutely in like an accelerated timeline, right? Like things are moving very, very quickly. Actually, I am going to touch on something that you had brought up because I loved the way that you were talking about it, was this like open source energy exchange. And I love the way you've described that, because one piece that I really see for the future is I do really see us going, reconnecting with Gaia in a big way and honoring our connection to nature, and even going back to some modern form of tribalism. But there no doubt is going to be technology layered on top of that. I mean,
Yep.
technology is not going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love this like idea of this open source energy exchange that permeates all structures and across society on a planetary and galactic level, that somehow I think technology is going to fuel that in some way. And to also touch on the masculine and feminine, like the building of it, the structure of it is going to be masculine, but that flow of energy across it is going to be feminine. And
Love
so,
that.
yeah, I don't know what this is or what it looks like, but I'm feeling that right now.
Yeah.
And I really do see humans, I really do believe that we are in this period of conscious ascension, and that we are entering, a new octave in individual, collective, and planetary consciousness. With that, I mean, I do, though, also believe that we're not going to transcend everything that's difficult or hard,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there will always be some form of human suffering, because I think that is part of the human experience. And I don't think in 30 years, probably not even 100 years, maybe not even 1,000 years, like I don't know if we're going to transcend the human experience of suffering. So
Mm-hmm.
but sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I don't think that's, I agree with you, because I don't think that's what it's about.
Yeah, right.
Like, I think when you first come into that concept of multidimensionality and kind of ascending beyond just the Maya of the 3D,
Yeah.
there's that tendency maybe to think, oh, I can get out of my suffering and the bad
Yeah.
stuff. It's heaven, right?
Right.
I really feel like, because if you think about dimensionality, it's not that like you said, it's not a hierarchy. It's not like
Hmm.
higher, lower. It's access to more information.
Yeah.
And I feel like technology is the representation of that.
Yes.
Even
Yep.
even a bridge, like there's something in
Right.
there that I can't put into words,
Yeah.
but I feel like the more our consciousness evolves
Yeah.
or ascends, the more that technology reflects that and then helps us to connect and utilize that
Absolutely.
information. Does that make sense? Do you agree?
Absolutely. Makes perfect sense to me. Yeah. And like at some point, like technology as we think about it, right? Like we physically create these computers and technology, like at some point that is not necessary, or it's obsolete, right? Because that flow of information is just there. I mean, that is just a universal, like that is the universal flow of energy. But I totally hear you. I mean, we already see that. Have you seen those pictures where it shows the structure of the internet, and then it shows like a map of like stars or the galaxy, or like
Same. Yep.
it's like the same, and then same with like the neurons in the brain and like how those fire. I mean, it's all replicating the same pattern. So I love that you said that, because you're right. Like technology will continue to evolve to get us to maybe create some bridges or facilitate like tapping into this greater flow of information.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, because even with like electricity, we don't really understand it, but we're
Yeah.
harnessing it, right?
Yeah,
Like we
right.
found a way to harness it. We found a way to harness this technology with computers and with our devices and
Yeah.
everything. And I mean, people are really afraid. I used to be really afraid of the singularity,
Mm,
where we merge with with technology, or come together with the machine. But
Yeah.
now I'm starting to feel like that is what our evolution is. That's a really big conversation.
Mm,
But like you were just saying, those bridges coming together and like helping us communicate. I mean, what if that's where we're going? I don't think it's something that should necessarily be
yeah.
resisted, but that's, like
Yeah.
I said, a big conversation around
It is.
technology and the organic human. But
We should have we should have that conversation at some point.
yeah,
That would be
totally.
fun. But I mean, look at the beauty of technology now. I mean, it's even allowing us to have this conversation,
And
right?
for
And like
people to hear this. Yeah.
yeah, I love it. And I really do. Gosh, yeah, I have such a like love-hate relationship with technology and social media in general. But to be honest, I am just like blown away by the connections I've been able to start building and to truly use it as a platform to speak my truth and to be my most authentic self. And like the response to it has just been overwhelmingly beautiful. And that love, like it is just a total expression of love and learning from one another, growing from one another, sharing in each other's experiences. And I mean, and I've like, this is like a new venture for me. I mean, I'm not even that far down the path. I'm just dipping my toe in and I'm just blown away.
Yeah. Me as well. It's like we're just connecting with each other to create this global community, and like it's helped us come online in order to be able to do that. I really see this. I mean, I'm such a futurist, but I really see this time as that initial period where we were getting used to the technology. Like this is when
Yeah.
the same as when they were getting used to electricity being a thing, or which wasn't that long ago if you
Yeah.
think about
Yeah.
evolution.
Right.
So yeah, it's really, I agree with you, it's a really beautiful way to connect and share love in ways that we did not have the opportunity to
Yeah.
before.
But we need the people who are doing it for good, right? Like who
Yeah.
are steering it in the right way. Because you're right, like we are, all things considered, we are still in those early phases. Like we're in the formative years of the way that technology is facilitating global communication. And we need the people who are going to drive it in that positive direction, because it could become destructive quickly, I think, if not used in a way, not used in integrity.
In a benevolent way, for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. Well, and that is part of our work, I feel,
Yeah,
to raise the
absolutely.
consciousness.
Totally.
Oh, well, this has been a fantastic conversation. It's
Yeah.
so easy. I knew you would
Yeah.
just be like so easy and delightful.
Yeah, this has been beautiful.
Well, my dear, where can people find you if they want to follow and connect with you online?
Yeah, so right now, I mean, my main focus, as I kind of just spoke into, is Instagram. I mean, that's where I am just starting to plant my seeds and build a beautiful community. It's where you found me.
Mm-hmm.
So you can find me on Instagram at i.mam.starfire, STARFIRE. Yeah, that's the main place so that I would love people to connect with me. My website is almost finished. Maybe it'll be finished by the time you publish this podcast. It is Starfire Rising. I'm sorry. Yes, no, sorry. starfirerising.com. I was like, there's more to that. No, starfirerising.com. So those are two places where you can connect with me.
Fantastic. And I really feel that you need to start your own podcast because you're a natural at it, and I could listen to you talk about things all day. So
thanks. It's been on the radar. So this has been a great, this conversation has really validated that for me. So thank you for that reflection.
Thank you.
Yes. Bye.
Whew, I hope you found this conversation with Chelsea expansive and enlightening. Be sure to visit the links in the show notes and give her a follow. And remember, if you loved this conversation and want to be notified when new transmissions are released, subscribe to the Liberate Yourself podcast in your favorite app. Until next time, take care out there.